Claude Monet painted over 2,000 works of art in his life. Whether in Paris, London, or New York, you can admire his work in museums all over the world. The most expensive one was sold by Sotheby's in 2019 for $100 million. Haystacks is number 11 on the list of the most expensive paintings in the world. Claude Monet doesn't really need an introduction, yet here we are. If you don't know me yet, my name is Jette, I'm an artist and a designer, and I'm gonna break down everything you ever needed to know about the art of Claude Monet in today's video.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to lot number 8. It's showing behind me the Claude Monet, the Merle, 55 million, 58 million for 97 million.
Monet's art is all about the aesthetics of nature. He studies how light and shadow affect color, and he most often depicts flowers and nature. He also paints on canvases that are literally bigger than my entire room. I'm not exaggerating. They are huge. As an artist myself, Claude Monet's way of painting is everything I aspire to be. I'm a fangirl, as you can see. I already tried to copy him occasionally, which I think turned out all right, but that's not enough. So here we are. There are different ways to learn about Monet's way of painting by either studying the originals intensively at the museum, read about his mastery in books, or from countless documentaries, or by traveling to the exact places where Monet used to paint and painting them myself. This is Copying the Masters Monet edition. Okay, so instead of copying a Monet that already exists, I'm going to be painting a new Monet, one that doesn't exist yet, at the exact place where Claude Monet used to paint his paintings. This is also my first attempt at an art documentary, so if you have any other paintings in mind that I could be covering or artists, please leave your suggestions down below, and also don't forget to subscribe. Trying to get to 10,000, so help your girl out. My first stop is Paris, France, Monet's place of birth, because you can best learn about a painter when following their footsteps, which is why I'm doing it in the most literal sense. And for those of you who are new to Claude Monet and his art, or if you just need a refresher, I got you. Monet grew up in a French town called Le Havre in the 1840s, where he discovered his passion for drawing and later painting. Years later, he moved to Paris to learn from professional painters, and he also tries to make his way into Paris's infamous art scene. And that is easier said than done because he has to be recognized by the Paris Salon. It's a very famous kind of annual exhibition. You have to get in there in order to be recognized. Some of his pieces make it, others are rejected again and again. When looking at these paintings, it's very clear that they have little to do with what we today know as his most important and famous pieces. And he wasn't the only one being rejected. Equally frustrated painters, including Monet, kind of girl boss, and founded their own exhibition and called themselves the Impressionists, which is based on Claude Monet's painting called The Impression, a piece that got mocked in the art world and wasn't perceived well first. Why? Because everyone had this common understanding that good art equals realistic and nature-like depictions. By calling themselves the Impressionists, this group of painters definitely entered their reputation era, meaning they claimed it, turned it around, and came back stronger than the 90s trend. Looking back now, Impressionism is one of, if not the most popular art form of the modern era. It's like the Taylor Swiftification of comebacks in art, just to throw in another Swiftie reference. Long story short, Monet and Impressionism go hand in hand. So why am I in Paris? To get a better understanding of Monet's painting style and its evolution, the Musée d'Orsay is just the perfect place to get a better idea. Here I can take a look at some of his earlier pieces and compare them to the ones that he painted towards the end of his life. I can clearly see how his style developed over the course of his life. Many of his pieces are just studies of color at a specific time of day, the same place in the morning, at noon, afternoon, and at night. Not only did he do this with the cathedral, he even painted the haystacks over 23 times. You may have also seen the bridge painting that he painted numerous times as well. It's masterful really how instead of painting clear architecture, Monet managed to paint the air, the lighting, and the overall mood of a fleeting moment. So these are quick studies, paintings that were never supposed to end up in a museum, that were just for practicing. Perfect for me because it shows the process instead of the finished piece. Comparing earlier works to later ones, you can see how forms disintegrate, he paints them more abstract. The impression, so the moment is fleeting, so he has to hurry up painting it before it's gone. Before he found his very own style, Monet clearly also copied other painters. Monet, however, after some time realized that nature is his true muse instead of painting people. Painting outside in nature, or au plein air, is another characteristic for Impressionism. Once he found a style also just many years later after the art scene developed to a different understanding of taste and aesthetic, he finally got the recognition he deserved in the Paris Salon as well. Giverny in the 1880s, Claude Monet, now already quite wealthy, acquired a big property with beautiful nature and enough space to paint. And that's also my next destination. Starting in Paris at Gare Saint-Lazare, also a place that Monet once painted, looks like this now. A train takes me to Vernon-Giverny, a small town 1 hour outside of Paris in the north of France. From the train station, it's another 15 minutes by bus until you arrive at the garden and his former home. And suddenly you are at a place which seems strangely familiar. In the middle of a hill is a pink house with green windows and a porch. You can take a tour, have a look inside the house and his former atelier and office. Everywhere there are copies of his paintings, with the originals now hanging in museums all over the planet, but you can kind of get the idea of how he used to live and work here. His garden really is his muse and the place where he painted the world-famous water lilies, a motif that now I will paint too, at the exact place just 140 years later. Next to his house is the garden, or should I say gardens. There are definitely multiple. He had these gardens designed simply to paint them. Despite this place being crowded by tourists, I took out my sketchbook and began to draw my own little sketches of the water lilies. And immediately I understand what Monet painted and how his perspectives came to be. Because on my page, without even trying, the same compositions come to life. I can see how the tree mirrors in the water and how the branches cast these long shadows. I'm painting the same willow tree that Monet used to paint so often and can't help but feel close to him. I can compare it to when you have faint memory from your past, can't quite grasp it, but then suddenly it's clear. And Monet himself also paints so abstract that it's hard to tell if something like a leaf or a flower is in the water or if it's merely a reflection. The willow tree in his paintings is always just a reflection, and I didn't get that before. I see his paintings completely different now because I have context. When I now stand in front of his work, I can see the real place in my mind. The garden is also tended to so that it always looks the same. I can highly recommend you visit if you are into Claude Monet's paintings as well. My last stop in Paris is the Musée de l'Orangerie. A museum specifically designed for the water lily paintings which Monet painted the last 30 years of his life. The 8 paintings, called Les Nymphéas, hang on ovally shaped, custom-made walls in 2 rooms, so 4 paintings each. And Monet himself was involved in the architecture of this museum, so they had these rooms made specifically to display the water lilies in all of their glory, and ever since the 1920s you can admire them here. It's incredible how lost you get within the depth of these paintings. The more you step away, the clearer you can see what is depicted, but the closer you get, the forms are more distorted and harder to identify, which sort of is a paradox, but that's the beauty behind Claude Monet's art. I went here to take a close look at the texture because there is not glass in front of it. You can get very close to the paintings. And there seem to be layers upon layers of paint on there. Some parts almost look grainy and rough, as if something is mixed in the paint. Something you cannot see the same way if you would look at a photo. And that is incredibly helpful for me because next I will be painting my own version of a Monet based on the sketches I made earlier. So wish me luck. How to paint a Monet in 5 days, step-by-step tutorial. Step 1, sketches. Go to Monet's garden and make quick sketches of your surroundings, ideally from the water, the flowers, the trees, and the reflections. Alternatively, go to your nearest park and find some sort of body of water to paint. Also, take a photo of the exact impression to use as orientation later. This is my photo that I will be painting. Step 2, canvas. I DIY'd my own canvas by first buying these wooden frames from the art store, which I'm now assembling to a 5 by 9 feet frame. You can't really buy these big canvases, so by wanting to work with bigger formats, building them yourself is kind of the only way. It looks harder than it is. The wooden parts simply interlock, so no screwdriver is necessary. Just make sure the frame is stable and all sides are aligned. Next is the fabric. I bought this by the meter at the art supply as well. You can use any fabric as long as it's dense and non-elastic, so any cotton, linen, whatever works. You are now going to stretch the fabric over the frame by folding it over the edges and fixing it using a staple gun. I'm also doubling the edges, so folding the fabric for a cleaner look before stapling it. Monet actually used nails for this, but I cannot be bothered, okay? I can get over the fact that I'm going this big, but in true Monet fashion, I just had to. If the fabric isn't as tight as you'd wish, don't worry, because the next step is applying a gesso, which is a base that stops the fabric from swallowing all your paint. I'm also going to be using oil paint, so this is definitely a necessary step for me. My gesso is transparent because Monet sometimes has his canvas shining through on some parts, and I wanted this option as well, even though, spoiler, I covered everything. but just so you know. For a cheaper option, just use white wall paint. It's affordable and with a few layers should work just as well. Step 3, colors. Monet's paintings always consist of lots of greens, blues, and purple colors mixed with white paint, and Impressionists never or rarely use black. Instead, they use dark greens, blues, reds, and so on. As a reminder, this is the photo I will be using as a composition reference for my Monet. For the colors, I'm taking inspiration from the water lilies at the museum, and the painting style is going to lean more towards Monet's color studies, since that is what just fits more within my time frame of a few days. Step 4, painting. I'm starting off with the darkest shade, which is a grayish blue, applying the paint with small circular brush strokes at first, then later more vertically, always referencing the object's shape and its structure. Next, I used a lighter green and an ochre to build depth and color variations. What I found difficult at first is to find a good level of abstraction, meaning how much detail do I paint and what parts do I leave out. And sometimes I find it easier to paint something realistically and nature-like because abstraction requires you to envision your result before bringing it to life. Also, I painted this over the course of a few days, so this is day 2. Here, I continued filling all the green parts, so mainly the bottom area. Day 3 was reserved for blue and purple shades, starting with the lightest colors and the cloud that is mirrored in the water. I have never painted clouds before well, so that was a challenge for me. And using oil color was helpful here, because the smooth texture allows me to blend the colors seamlessly. And you get a good idea of my technique here. I'm mixing a shade of blue, applying it to different parts of the canvas, then mixing in a new shade of blue and repeating the process. At day 4, I actually repainted a lot of this because even though it didn't look bad at all, my goal here still is to paint my impression, so based on the photo. So I had to adjust the blue area, building in some texture as well and just using a darker blue in general. For the texture, I used a thicker paint, so less oil paint thinner on a rougher brush. And this way, some of the background layer still shines through to get a more grainy and layered look. The last day, I painted some of the details and the water lilies, and I understand now why Monet worked so many years on his paintings. I still see parts that I'm unhappy with, that in my opinion still need improvements, so in true Monet fashion, I reworked a lot of parts in the following weeks. Step 5, overthinking. Overthinking is always a part of the painting process. Here I didn't like how green the water lilies looked in comparison to the rest of the blue and the water. So I found they stand out quite a bit, so I took some creative freedom with it, which is probably something Monet himself did as well. I tried to better integrate them into the background, also working in some lighter pinks and blue shades as water reflections. This is the before and after, and personally, I think this step took the painting to another level. So this is my Monet before the improvements, and without further ado, let me show you how my end result looks like. Okay, so I hope you're ready, because this took me a week. I also made some more improvements since the last time we saw each other. Help. Okay. Ready? That's my Monet. What do we think? Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to this channel, and as I mentioned before, let me know if you would like to see me maybe paint a Van Gogh, an Andy Warhol. I'm up for a challenge, so yeah, let me know. And I see you in my next video. Bye!